Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited for welcoming each and every one of you for this last day, the 12th day, AICTE sponsored online 2-week faculty development program on teaching learning methods towards outcome-based education, phase 3, organized by the Department of Computer Science and Engineering and Department of Artificial Intelligence and Data Science, Velamal Institute of Technology, Panchatti. Welcome to all the participants and to our chief speaker, Dr. Harold Andrew Patrick, who is a qualified industrial and organizational psychologist with over 3 decades of postgraduate teaching, corporate training, and research experience. He is professor and dean academics, CMS Business School, Jane, DMTB University, Senior Manager, Leadership and Organization Development, Infosys Leadership Institute, Infosys Limited, Professor and Head, Organizational Behavior and Human Resource Management Area, Institute of Management, Christ, deemed to be University, for close to 2 decades. He has published over 80 plus articles in referred and peer reviewed national and international journals with an H index of 11 and I-10 index 11. He has won more than a dozen Best Paper Award at international conferences. He is a resource person for many training programs for corporate and facilitated individual training modules for HAL, ABB, GMR, BPCL, HP, Infosys, and many small and medium scale organizations for entry level, junior level, and middle level managers. He has trained for entry level, junior level, and middle level managers on personal effectiveness, interpersonal effectiveness, leadership, team building, mentoring, conflict management, motivation and commitment, communication skills, effective presentation skills, self awareness, and other tailor made modules for both corporate clients and academic institutions. His felicitation process is based on research using diagnostic tools and psychometric instruments, videos, case studies, and introspective learning. His interest lies in human behavior and its application at the workplace and has trained extensively in these areas with working managers, faculty members, Christian leaders, educational leaders, business graduate, and working students. He is an elected member of the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology, USA. So it is a pleasure having you as the guest speaker for this session. May I hand over the session to you?
Very good morning. It's a great honor to be a part of a group that I spent over 3 decades in terms of my teaching, research, and training. I thank Dr. Gladys for inviting me for this session on teacher characteristics. And I'm sure that the next 2 hours would help unfold some of the things that we already do and reinforce some of the things that we can still do in terms of the disruptions that we've experienced in the last 2 years. It's a great privilege for me to share some of my own deep experiences over the choice of being a teacher. And therefore, it comes as a vocation for me to be a teacher. The word voco comes from the Latin root voco, which means to be specially called. And I'm assuming that everybody here this morning have used this particular meaning in terms of choosing this particular role for a lifetime. Though I spent a couple of years in industry, I think my deep calling has been in the academia, and I have, to the best of my knowledge, contributed in this particular area. Having said that, I request the participants to quickly, in the chat box, write one characteristic that you think you possess that makes you effective as a teacher. Just one characteristic in the chat box. Yeah, as you keep putting it in the chat box, I will collect them a little bit later, and then we shall see what we can do with these characteristics. And then, if at all we know these characteristics, then why is this session? What is the relevance of a session when we know what the characteristics are that is required for us to be effective with a learner? I would rather call as a learner, okay? Can you all see the slides? Is the slides clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I intend to do this morning is first talk about what a characteristic is and what differentiates a stable versus a state-like characteristic, because there are a couple of things that we had never done prior to 2019, which we today have embedded, as well as we have grafted, though it's not part and parcel of our characteristic, yet we have grafted it not being extremely comfortable. And if you're a 50 plus faculty member like me, um, as I tell myself that old dogs cannot learn new tricks. But I, an old dog, had to learn a lot of new tricks in the last 2 years for me to um, graft a couple of characteristics that is not part and parcel of my being so that I could be effective in the class. I will show you one video of an Indian professor in the US who is one of the world's best effective teachers. And we could draw a tremendous amount of lessons because you come from the engineering backgrounds. Most of the faculty here, I'm assuming that most of you are coming from the engineering background. And Dr. Java is also, Mariappan Jawahar is also an engineering faculty. You might connect a chord with this particular TED video, and then we will discuss rather than um, I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm only a guide on the side to a larger extent, and that's the role that has shifted. And the roles that we engage in, which is 360-degree roles, and teaching is only one part of this role. Let's see how we could reflect. It's not, there is nothing, there might be nothing new. Um, there could be nothing new that, sorry. I'll just change the. Okay, so let's look at teacher characteristics. When you now look at this famous quote by Robert Sternberg, who says that there is no recipe to be a great teacher. That's what is unique about them. So the uniqueness of all who are present here is that we have our own time-tested recipes that we have learned either by observing some people that we think were effective, some teachers who taught us that had an impression upon our lives, or we learned it through the method of trial and error or experimentation. So there was tremendous amount of differences in terms of how each one of us have come to design our own way of the teaching learning process. And this is the uniqueness that cannot be replicated. It cannot be explicitly written down like a cooking recipe. It's an implicit, intuitive, gathered over experience that we gain to not only deal with different types of students, but also in terms of how we allow students to think and how to process it and how they will do things. So you have the thinking and the doing as two major components. So how do you process information and how do you allow people after they have processed information to do something about it, which could be applicable in solving problems that we have. I have about, let's look at, I, okay, yeah, a couple more. I have about 35 participants. It would be nice if you'll put in one characteristic that you think um, there is Mayank. Can you? My volume is also the highest. Can everybody hear me clear? Is there a problem?
No, sir. We
Yes,
are
sir.
listening.
You can hear me?
We can hear you,
Yes,
sir.
yes.
Yeah.
You are absolutely audible, but
Ah,
just we are getting voice is slow. That's problem. Nothing. It's you are at the highest end. No problem, sir. You may continue, please.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So, so the first thing that we look at is in terms of the word characteristic. The other word that is normally used in psychology is a trait. If you look at a characteristic, it's a quality or a feature that belongs to a person serving to identify themselves. So if I say that I'm a teacher, that means there must be certain quality or feature that I possess in a larger extent that makes me a teacher and not an engineer. Okay. For example, the characteristics that an engineer and the teacher will share, for example, hard work or analytical ability, problem solving, a teacher also possesses them, an engineer also possesses them. So, what is the difference? What is the feature or quality that is typical, that makes me a teacher, is the extent to which this characteristic is engaged by me because of my role. Okay? For example, an engineer would be problem solving 80% of the time, whereas a teacher might not be problem solving 80% of the time. So problem solving for an engineer with vis-a-vis his role would be to a larger extent to possess that characteristic at that particular level. Whereas for me as a teacher, problem solving could happen 20 to 30% of the time in terms of when I engage in my work. And therefore, it's a distinguishing quality belonging to a person who occupies a role. For example, when I was a teacher, the characteristics that I had maximum, okay, became moderate to minimum when I joined Infosys. And there I had to trigger another set of characteristics that seems similar to what I was doing as a teacher. Okay, so now if you look at the characteristics and the trait, which is a synonym, that you could say a characteristic is a trait that individuals possess, that distinguishing quality that he or she has, so that he or she engages in a role more effectively. Okay, so there are two types of characteristics. Now, there is a trait which is stable and enduring in similar situations. If extroversion or introversion is a trait, an extroverted person can never become an introverted person, and an introverted person can never become an extroverted person. Having said this, now that is a trait. That means the way we think, feel, and behave across situations between individuals remain the same. Okay? I can't be an extrovert at home and an introvert in the college. So if I'm saying I'm an extrovert at home, I'm an extrovert in college, I'm an extrovert in a party. However, there are states like characteristics. For example, I'm an introvert. I'm a teacher and I spend a lot of time researching because I'm an introvert. I would rather sit for 20 hours and do research rather than teach a class. But I also have to teach a class. So what do? I learn how to be effective to teach a class. Now, what am I doing? A way of thinking, feeling, and behaving, which is not part and parcel of me, is now I'm making a conscious effort to graft it in my personality so that 20% of the time when I teach, I am effective. Now, these are called as malleable traits, traits that can be grafted, but is not stable over a period of time. Yeah, it is not stable over a period of time. Therefore, once we understand that there are two things that we need to look while we are looking at our role and what we are good at and what makes us effective. Yeah. So I know that I get 10 on 10 when it comes to teaching. But today, teaching is only one aspect in the academic or the collegial sort of an environment. And if that is true, how do I train the weak muscles that make me effective in situations that I am not familiar with. And that would become the key differentiating factor in terms of the characteristics or the traits that we possess to make the learner and the student-centric approach become more outcome-based. Now, very interestingly, the connecting the cornerstone on which this 12-day program is based on outcome-based education. And while we are looking at outcome-based education, while we are looking at outcome-based education, what is it that has changed from the time 20 years ago or 30 years ago? 20 years ago, when I was a teacher, I told or designed whatever I did, whether it's the syllabus or the session plan or the question paper, all of it was designed assuming that these are the most important things that the student must know. So I decided. So if I was a PhD, the way my syllabus was made was different from a person who had done his MPhil or who had just done his master's. A person who had done his master's or higher education in state universities were different from this faculty who studied in central universities to institutions of eminence, yeah, or top ranking institutes. And faculty syllabus and the teaching learning facilitation and the processes of delivery was different if you were trained abroad and came back. And we found tremendous amount of differences in terms of how we designed it, keeping the teacher as the center of most of it. This is what I think is important. These are very important questions that the student should answer, and so on and so forth. But the outcome-based education says no. What is the student want out of this course? So the learning outcomes or the course outcomes is different from the course objectives. The course objectives, to a larger extent, tells the learner or the participant in my class what will the course cover. And therefore, to a larger extent, the facilitator is the author of the course objectives. He says that it will tell you what are the differences, what are the theories. It will examine the pluses and minuses of a particular theory. It will also tell you the practical applications. However, when it comes to converting it into a course outcome, it is what the student will take away. So what will the student ultimately gain, which is measurable in terms of the rubrics that I design in specifically measuring what can the student learn at the end of it. Yeah. So if that is the context, then what is the type of characteristics that a teacher in this particular environment would need to be effective? So the way we write the course objectives would be totally different from the way we write the course outcomes. The course outcomes normally start with an action, active verb. Okay, it could start from the distinguishing between two theories. The student will, at the end of it, would be able to distinguish between the types of granules in a sugar. So you have different types of sugar. He identifies what is the types of sugar, and then he would be able to identify what type of granules is required for what type of concoction or what type of a solution. So this is the specific outcome that the student will learn, and therefore all the assessments should be around the outcome of what the student will take away. Yeah. Having said this, I will now contextualize how different is teaching from schools to teaching an adult. Now, you must understand, I'm assuming that all of us teach in higher education. That means you're teaching graduation, post-graduation, and higher education in terms of your PhD programs and so on and so forth. Now, what is the type of students that come to us? Okay, what is the type of students that come to us? They already possess some sort of an education. So they've studied 10 years plus 2 years. So 12 years of formal education. They are 18 years and plus, and therefore they are to a larger extent, they have a degree. They would have they would have studied in a relevant or in a non-relevant stream. Now, with the new education policy saying that to do engineering, you don't basically, there are lots of engineering courses where science might not be a basic requirement in terms of math and physics and so on and so forth. So the first thing that you must understand is these adults come with some sort of a relevant or a non-relevant learning experiences. They come with all sorts of experiences for the past 18 years. The experiences they would have had in the school, the experiences they would have had in their pre-university or in a college if you're teaching at a higher degree. Yeah, if you're teaching at a higher degree, then we would normally tend to, you know, pitch the type of courses a little bit more different. So they come with experiences. It could be either positive experiences or negative experience. So they have tremendous amount of biases towards subjects that they have learned in the previous years, and also to a larger extent, they would have had favorites, or they would have built in their own mechanisms of coping and adapting to difficult subjects that they're not interested in, but yet they need to engage in it. They're also goal oriented. Most of the young millennials are extremely goal oriented. They have a short perspective. They want to do or complete or get something as quickly as possible. And therefore, they would look at shortcuts for trying to get where they want to. Um, they tend to be more collaborative. They might not be cooperative, but if they want to get something done, they are willing to reach out and get other people to help them achieve their goals. Now, this is the sort of students that come. They are digitally extremely good using tools and techniques that most of us might be unaware of, or who are slow to adapt to such digital tools and techniques and technology, but they possess all of this. So if this is the sort of students that we normally get, then how do we look at two things? One is the perception continuum and the processing continuum. In the perception continuum, how we think about things. Now, the thinking and then the doing component. So, the perception continuum is the characteristic of an effective teacher is you're asking them to think or you're thinking for them. Okay. You're asking them to think, you're thinking for them. You're doing things for them, or you're making them do things. So processing continuum versus the perception continuum. So now both of these are important. Okay, so something that is cognitively changed should also be engaged if it is measurable. I know, okay, they say it was, I think, Benjamin Franklin who said that, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. So if you look at the involving the student, the characteristic of how do a teacher involve a student? How does a teacher involve a student? After concretizing a particular theory. Now, with these two things, and most of the adult learners, from the context of they already possess some sort of a learning experience, they come with all sorts of experiences that they've had for 12 to 14 years. They're goal oriented, they're extremely collaborative in achieving their goals. In such cases, most of us should understand that memories fade with time and lessons are forgotten. But experiences shape a human being and leave a lasting mark. Yeah. And it is only teachers who have this privilege of guiding the learner in experiencing early experiences and discoveries of who they are and what can they be and what they can do. And if that's the case, the Kolb's learning cycle here is to a larger extent talking about experiential learning. Experiential learning has two major components in terms of the perception continuum and the processing continuum. And then these two basic behaviors, divide them into four. Okay. Now, if you look at the concrete experience and the reflective observation, it's the right side of the brain, which is descriptive, artistic, and requires reflection. Whereas the abstract conceptualization and the active experimentation is the triggering of the left brain in terms of problem solving, logical, only one right answer. It has sequential information. Now, a characteristic of a teacher is you could either be teaching from the concrete experience, you could be designing your courses from the concrete experience because that is where you are good at, or I might be good at mostly in concrete experiences in terms of feeling. And therefore, to a larger extent, I'm only triggering the right side of my brain and not at all worried about the left side of the brain. But in my class, I have a lot of students who are left brained rather than right brained. And if they are left brained, for them, when they sit in my class and I'm constantly giving them great stories and great episodes and great experiences and showing them something, they normally get bored because they feel that they're not learning anything. Some of us might be very good in watching, observing, okay, reflective observation. Now look at observe something and write something about it. Now this could also happen in a laboratory, which is right brain. It's not necessarily problem solving. You're observing the changes that happens when two chemicals are being put together. And then they say, what did you observe? Write it down. Okay, so in an experimental, in a lab record, you say that I first put sodium and then I mixed it with something of so much of ml, and this is what happened. Now it's not problem solving. It's not left brain. It's just looking at something and then describing it. And then you have all the theories, all the principles, all the laws in terms of thinking. Why did it happen? Why did this change happen? And then we talk about this is the theory behind this particular change. This is the person who propounded this particular theory. So you have the extremely thinking component of, is the world flat, or is it oval, or is it round, is it rotating, or is it flat? So the thinking is to a larger extent the left, and the doing part, the active experimentation part. So if you look at the Bloom's taxonomy, and I'm sure that now at the end of the 12th day, all of you are familiar with the Bloom's taxonomy from recalling, okay? Recall the story that I narrated to you, to what did you understand about the story, to a small story. Now, look at how you can move it, okay? So, can you recall the story I narrated to you? What did you understand from the story? Where will you apply the story in your life and everywhere else? Okay. Can you analyze different stories that you have read and say which story is better? Can you design and write a story based on this? Can you create an own story of your own? So you would move from the recall to creating something just by narrating a particular story. So the Bloom's taxonomy, just with a simple thing. So in kindergarten, okay, reciting and recalling a rhyme is great. Okay. And then you look at, what did you understand from the rhyme? Yeah. And then you could move up. And as you move up the thing, you would notice tremendous amount of changes. So my submission to all the people or all the colleagues that are here is that reflect upon, in your own personality, are you more feeling? Are you more watching? Are you more thinking? Are you more doing? Now, each one of us have a strength. Yeah, each one of us have strengths. Some of us are extremely uh, uh, doing people. Some of us are extremely observing people. Some of us are extremely good in rattling off the theories and the principles and the laws. Some of us are feelings, and this is a cyclical aspect. You could start at concrete experience and then move to reflective observation, move to abstract conceptualization, and then active experimentation. An apple fell on Newton's head. A lot of things fall on most of our heads, but we didn't become Newton. So he experienced, okay, he said, why did the apple fall on my head? He started observing other things and reflecting upon, why did the apple fall on my head? What would have happened if it was a feather? Or would it still fall on my head? Would it fall at the same velocity or the same speed? And then he reflected, and then he gave us the Newtonian laws. Okay, so he propounded the laws, and then he experimented on the laws, and then again he moved to the concrete experience. So the experience that was pretty distributed and not extremely um, cohesive becomes something extremely concrete, and because of the experimentation. Or you could experiment something, and then you could move from any of these things. Yeah. So having said this, I will stop sharing for the time being, and then take up some quick questions from the audience before I move on to exhibit a video of a famous engineering faculty that made him an effective teacher. And then I would look at the chat box and the characteristic, one characteristic that makes you effective. Yeah. So if I look at the chat box, I'd still have just 1, 2, and 3. I would urge you and recommend that if you give me data, I could use this data to help say and be more effective in terms of the content. Is there any question at this point in time? So you could unmute and then ask me the question, or you could add to what I am saying. You could also add your own episodes and things like that. Silence is golden. There's no questions at this point in time. Can I go ahead, or would some faculty would love to participate in? I'm sorry, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm audible. So people are. I mean, so is there? Do you want me to go ahead? Does anybody would like to share something? Would you like to ask anything, or should I go ahead? Okay, so I've just got one response saying go ahead. So
Hello.
yes, yes, Maya.
Sir, learner-centered classroom and personalized instructions is the characteristics for present days. Is learner-centered classroom and personalized instructions by teacher.
Yes. So you have the learner who's the center of anything that I design as a teacher, especially the teaching, learning, evaluation plans. Now, let's say, for example, what is my teaching, learning, evaluation plan based on? It should be based on the type of students that I get. Okay, so the first thing that I would do is once I have either my past experience, okay, the type of students of the institute, say for example, in your institute, what are the type of students that enroll in your institutes? What are their goals? Okay, what is it that they possess?
Yes, sir.
How much can they take? And then you tailor make it without diluting the basic requirements of that particular level. Yeah, just because I have very poor academically challenged students, it doesn't mean that I can bring down the rigor and the quality of the course because of it. So I would look at, say, for example, instead of giving them too many written tests, maybe I could give them a project and they could learn the same concepts by doing a project, okay, by doing a group project or doing an individual large library assignment.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it is left to the teacher, and that is the autonomy of the teacher, and the mastery and the autonomy of the teacher is based on his or her ability to monitor what type of students come into the program and what is it that they are seeking for. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sir, one sentence I listened somewhere.
Yes.
Students as a producers. So can we relate this as a teacher's characteristics?
Students as a
Producers.
product.
Yes, sir.
Students as a product. So if they have been with you for 4 years, then if students are a product, then your engineering college is a factory. You're manufacturing engineers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what is the process that we use to get the best engineers out that differentiates your engineering college from some other engineering college?
Yes, sir.
So these best practices, okay, would become the USP, the unique selling proposition, that why your students are picked up by industries
Yes, sir.
more often.
Mhm.
Okay, they can. I would not categorize them as products. I would categorize them as contributors. I actually I generate contributors to solve problems, not only for corporates, but it could also be starting their own venture, or it could be
Yes,
in the joining a government or a not-for-profit organization. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So having said
Thank you.
this, yeah, thank you very much for
Thank you.
having said this. I will now share with you a video, and then this is Dr. Mariappan Java of Jawaharlal. Okay, he's also known as Dr. Java. He's a professor of mechanical engineering at California Poly, Sonoma. Okay, he's recognized as an outstanding educator for his innovative and engaging teaching pedagogy. He has received numerous honors, including the Northrop Grumman Award for Excellence in Teaching and Innovative Educator Award. Dr. Java is well known for his hands-on, and his approach is called the guided discovery approach. Yeah, the guided discovery approach. And he is the most revered teacher coming from the state of Tamil Nadu. Yeah, and is very, very famous world over. So let me. Can you all see the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So let me start. Uh, One second. No?
Offered a job as an assistant professor at a university in the state of Michigan. It was late summer and I had a few weeks to go before I start teaching. I was excited and terrified. Excited because I always wanted to teach.
Can you hear as well as see?
Yes, sir, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
And I got the job. Terrified because I was not sure if I had the knowledge, language, and communication skills to teach. I wasn't too worried about the knowledge because I know students did not know that material, and that they don't know that I don't know the material either. So that was okay. English was my third language, and I was not fluent. And I had an accent on top of that. I still have an accent. So I wasn't sure if the students would understand me. If I had a British accent, I would have kept it. Anyhow, I was also worried about my language skills and communication skills. See, when I talk about communication skills with students, I was terrified to be with them talking about skills that I didn't have. So I was so terrified, I was sitting that summer at home thinking, my God, I made a mistake. I should have continued myself to be an engineer. Why would I quit my job and become a professor? I was depressed. I was watching a movie with my daughters, a Disney movie. Suddenly, I had a moment of revelation. I ran to my bathroom, stood in front of the mirror, and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, how can I be a better teacher in the fall?" And I waited. The mirror didn't answer me. Then I got a phone call from the department chair who hired me. And I understood from him how the teaching system works. Basically, it works like this. You are a new teacher. Your department chair or the school principal will give you a piece of paper called curriculum or syllabus. And it has a list of topics that you are supposed to cover. And you are expected to cover those topics in certain amount of time, such as one semester. That's it. You don't have to do anything other than to follow those topics. What is expected from you is to give quizzes and exams, so it's harder for the students. How you teach, how much of a topic you cover, how less you cover, how fast you cover, doesn't matter. It's all up to you. That's how the teaching works. And that's interesting. So I got this syllabus, and I am ready to go and teach. And in traditional teaching, that's all. You go and lecture in the classrooms. So I am all ready. I am going to go to teach the students, and I prepared in the traditional way. And I prepared hard exams. Exams are hard and unrealistic. In fact, it was so hard and unrealistic, I have no doubt Isaac Newton would fail the calculus class in a high school. By the way, Isaac Newton invented calculus. Now, can you imagine Isaac Newton with his long hair sitting in the back row in somebody's calculus class? And that teacher is teaching calculus with PowerPoint. Isaac, don't fall asleep. What's wrong with you? Don't you know calculus is a tough subject? Pay attention, otherwise you will fail AP calculus. That's what we are doing to our students today. Isaac Newtons and Galileos won't pass our classes anymore. It's so tough, unrealistic. Anyhow, I go to my class, I teach my students, and I prepared hard, I work hard. So my lectures come out all right, my students like me, I get good student evaluation, and I would have stayed there. But I felt something is missing. Something that students are not learning. I mean, they are doing better, but I don't feel they're connected. There is some kind of a disconnect. Then I came across a quote by Phyllis Diller, who was a stand-up comedian. We learn from comedians a lot. And her quote goes something like this. In the first 12 months, we teach our kids to walk and talk. And then we tell them, sit down and shut up. Aha. So our students, I prepare my lectures and deliver all these lectures, and I'm very excited about it. But the students are not responding, not learning enough. They are not involved, they are not engaged. So I realized there's something I got to do. So I start out my journey of figuring out a way to engage students. I came up with a few things, all right? So I'm going to share them with. The first thing is be original. Why? Well, I have 23 years of education in 4 different countries in 3 continents, and I have hundreds of teachers. And I found one common thing among all bad teachers. All bad teachers are boring. It doesn't matter. They come from different cultural backgrounds. They have different styles, but they're all boring. They live in their own world. They communicate to themselves. In other words, they talk to themselves. They don't communicate with the students. And that wasn't exciting. Then I looked at all the good teachers. I read books about teaching. I listened to great teachers about teaching. I watched even movies. Then I saw all great teachers that I liked are very different. They spoke different languages. Some of them spoke very loudly. Some of them were soft-spoken. Some of them were very humorous. Some of them were serious. Some of them were moving around a lot, and some of them were standing still. In fact, I loved a teacher in Russia who would stand still and talk softly, but he would tell stories that we would be on the edge of our seat to listen to him. Such an engaging speaker, but he wasn't loud. He was standing still. I thought that's a fantastic way to teach, so I tried that out in my class. In 15 minutes, it was a disaster. Because I am not him. I got to move around. I got to be loud. So I realized the good thing about good teaching is you be original. Don't copy anybody else. And that's easy. That means all you have to be is be yourself. So that's the first lesson I learned. Be yourself. Be original. And then the second important thing it occurred to me over a period of time of teaching is renounce teaching. Now, I'm not kidding. It sounds silly and ridiculous. Renounce teaching. Why? Because teaching is not learning. Think about it. Renounce teaching means you are recognizing the fact teaching is not learning. First, let's talk about this. Teaching is about teachers. Learning is about students. In traditional teaching, teaching is like teachers giving a cup of water to the students, and learning is like students drinking that cup of water entirely. That sounds more like a treatment than learning to me. Now, if that worked, 100% of the knowledge has been transferred to the student, then everybody would be a student. And that doesn't work. That means teaching is not a process of information transfer like transferring through a high-speed USB drive. It's not like we can download something into our brain very quickly, like in a movie like Matrix, and learn to fly a helicopter. It's not. Second, learning occurs independent of teaching. In fact, learning can occur independent of teaching without teacher. Think about kids walking. Do we go and tell a kid 8 months old, listen, I am going to tell you some pointers on how to walk. Don't start the step. No, we don't do that. Learning occurs without, and that's true for all essential life skills, whether walking, talking, eating. They learn by trial and error, experimenting. We can support them, we can help them, but learning occurs without teaching. And the third important part of understanding why teaching is not learning is your own beliefs. Our personal beliefs control our actions, right? Religious beliefs or any other beliefs control our action. If you think you are supposed to teach, then the focus is on you. So what you are going to do is to focus on your presentation, on your lecture, on your exams, on your methods, on your glory. Student learning doesn't even make that list. So the idea of teaching is not helping to learn. So it is very important you renounce teaching. It's in a sense like Alcohol Anonymous. If you are an alcoholic,
Sir, any issues?
to make their life harder, or is it it's in a sense like Alcohol Anonymous. If you are an alcoholic and if you want to become sober, what do? First acknowledge you are an alcoholic. So first acknowledge or curse without, and that's true for all essential life skills, whether walking, talking, eating. They learn by trial and error, experimenting. We can support them, we can help them, but learning occurs without teaching. And the third important part of understanding why teaching is not learning is your own beliefs. Our personal beliefs control our actions, right? Religious beliefs or any other beliefs control our action. If you think you are supposed to teach, then the focus is on you. So what you are going to do is to focus on your presentation, on your lecture, on your exams, on your methods, on your glory. Student learning doesn't even make that list. So the idea of teaching is not helping to learn. So it is very important you renounce teaching. It's in a sense like Alcohol Anonymous. If you are an alcoholic and if you want to become sober, what do? First acknowledge you are an alcoholic. So first acknowledge teaching is not learning. And once you recognize that, you can move on to the next step of how you can help students to learn. And that would be getting to their eye level. It's very easy to understand. We have to get to the eye level of students. How do you do that? Well, we do that in our everyday life. Think about it. You have a child. You want to communicate with the child. You want to tell a story maybe. You want to read a book or you want to sing a song. What do? You get on your knees so you can be at their eye level. Or you carry them so you can be at their eye level. That's how the communication takes place, not from the podium to the students. So get on to their eye level in our context means understanding the subject matter from students' perspective. And the student's perspective is very simple. Quite often they don't understand why I am learning this. Is there a real meaning behind it, or is it just to make their life harder, or is it what is the real application? Why can't we upfront and tell that? So getting to their eye level is an important next step. All right? Once you get, and one way to practice that is, I always practice these days, is to ensure you can explain any difficult concept to a fifth grader. Trust me, any concept, whether it is thermodynamics or nuclear engineering, can be explained to a fifth grader in simple terms in a broad way. So if you understand the subject matter, you can explain to a fifth grader. Today, I practice this. Before I teach my first year, second year engineering classes, I try these concepts in fifth grade, eighth grade, or high school, because I'm part of an outreach program. And if you can explain to a fifth grader, that means you are communicating the concept in a simple language without technical jargon. So students, if there are any here, next time, if your professor says something and you don't understand, ask them to explain again. If they can't explain you in a different way or in a simpler way, trust me, they don't understand the subject themselves. You are better off leaving them alone and go use Google or Wikipedia. All right? The next important aspect of teaching or learning is to help students to make mistakes. Now, this is something well written. Researchers have done that. Without making mistakes, you cannot learn. But we don't let them make mistakes. We grade them poorly. Here's my analogy. If you don't make small mistakes and understand the consequences in a controlled environment in your classroom, you are going to make big blunders in life later. That's number one. Number two, if you avoid those blunders, then you are not going to take any initiative. You're never going to make any important decisions in life. And that's why making mistakes is so important. To do that, you can keep your classrooms like a basketball or a soccer practice sessions. You work hard, you understand your mistakes, you exercise, you fix your mistakes, you develop strategy, you work with your teammates, so you prepare for a final game. But what is happening in our classrooms is every class session is becoming like a final game. And that's stressful, all right? So you have to let them make mistakes. Now, once you can do that, the next most important point in my approach for teaching or helping students to learn is to completely avoid the term, what we call don't reinvent the wheel. How many times you hear, don't reinvent the wheel, don't reinvent the wheel? This is by far the most counterproductive statement ever there is. If you want students to learn, help them reinvent the wheel. Every student must reinvent the wheel in their mind. How can you understand something without experiencing? If you want to learn to ride a bike, it's not a big deal. Everybody rides a bike. But still, balancing the bike is an individual action. You got to experience it. Nobody can substitute that for you. So you have to create that experience for students. All right? So reinvent the wheel means you have to reinvent Newton's law in your mind. Otherwise, it is just an equation that you memorize without any understanding. In fact, I have absolutely no shame in admitting, in first grade, I did not believe the earth is round. Because it didn't make any sense. How do you know the earth is round? Now you have pictures in the last 20, 30 years from satellites and all that. When I went to school, I didn't have even TV. We didn't know. So I secretly harbored this notion that the earth is flat, but I would answer always, it's round, because that's what I was told. And many students are doing this in engineering and every discipline. They don't believe, they do not understand, but they answer the questions. So if you want to change that, you have to provide them that experience. How do you provide? One simple way to do that. Simple question. What do you think? This one simple question I stumbled on once, and I still use it in 3rd grade, 5th grade, high school, graduate school. I use it successfully. Ask the students, what do you think? Any questions? You never answered. Most of the time I did this because I didn't know the answer. I know it. I was teaching a 3rd grade group of students robotics. This little girl comes to me and says, Dr. Java, my robot is not working. I say, what do you think? She thinks for a second and looks at me and says, Dr. Java, I think my wires are not properly plugged in, connected. I said, okay. She tries it out a few minutes later. Dr. Java, my robot is still not working. I say, what do you think? And she says, maybe my battery is not working. I said, okay. Now, this is interesting. I thought she would just look at the battery level and say, it has enough. She looked at it. It had, 1 bar or 2 bars. Not enough, I feel. But she says, let me check. And then she grabs another robot, changes the battery, and finds the other robot is working. So she says, Dr. Java, the battery is fine. I didn't even think of that solution, but she's figuring out. I was thinking about teaching now how to use a multimeter to a 3rd grader because she's ready. She's ready. The point is we went through these interactions a few times and she realized there is no problem with the hardware. So finally it occurred to her, Dr. Shiva, it has to be my program. Okay. I didn't do anything. She thanked me for helping her to solve the problem. All I did is, what do you think? I have done hundreds of these exercises in different classes, just with the simple question, what do you think? It makes my life easier, and it makes them to think, and they are discovering themselves what should be done. What a great joy of discovery for them, and less work for professors, right? So what do you think is an outstanding way to help our students? And the last part of reinventing the wheel is, I tell the students, don't take the students on a bus ride. This is from an educator called Jay Cross. We always take our students on a bus ride. That means I am the driver, professor. I control where the bus goes. I control its speed. I stop where I want, and the students are watching. It may be fun for a few minutes, but they're going to fall asleep. What I feel is we got to take our students on a bike ride. Now, if you are on a bike ride, you cannot fall asleep. And you can stop anywhere you want. And you can make some digressions and learn more. And teacher becomes an active participant with the students. So you got to design your curriculum, design your activity for a bike tour. That involves all the students. If you do all this, you are going to engage the students. And when you engage the students, they learn automatically. That's what I have learned. So my final thought is, in my opinion, real learning occurs when you immerse the learner in a situation, allow them to perform, give them feedback to change or adjust their behavior. And that's how the real learning occurs. And our job as educators is to create those situations. Thank you.
I hope it was a interesting video. What could be some of the lessons that the audience here would you take away from this video by Dr. Java? And I'm sure that you will connect much more with him because he's an engineering faculty himself. Quickly, can I get some responses?
I guess he said you cannot teach students. Now students have got more information than probably a teacher has. So we can just tell them how they can keep learning by showing them various ways of and methods of learning new things.
Okay.
That was one of
Yeah. So what do you think would be your role then as a teacher?
what Bloom's taxonomy says, that creating, we all have to design a pedagogy keeping our syllabus topic in mind, that how can we make them apply those knowledge and create something new out of that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
What do the others think? So thinking and doing, two important things I spoke about while introducing the topic in terms of the experiential learning of adults, applicable also to children. Go ahead. What is the learnings by Dr. Java?
Making the students involved in the class. Involvement could be gained by the practical exercises, what could be given in the session, sir.
Okay, practical exercises to be given in the sessions. Okay.
Hello, sir. Good morning, sir.
Sure, sure. Go ahead, doctor.
Regarding instead of how much you are going to teach, you have to know how much they are going to understand. They are going to able to do something.
Okay. So the
As
doing
say
part.
in OBE, student centric, learner centric. It should be. Yes, sir.
Sure, sure. So the doing aspect should also come with the thinking aspect. So the thinking as well as the doing. So processing as well as perception. Okay. Any other
We
learning?
can able to achieve all the levels of the Bloom. All levels of Bloom's taxonomy can be achieved by making students to do something.
Yes. Please, I will make one cautionary note that all courses need not necessarily address all the levels of the Bloom's taxonomy. Yeah. So please
Yes.
keep that in mind that it's not required that all the courses will have to touch the all the 5 levels. So we will become over enthusiastic. Yeah. So the appropriateness of how you would connect and what the student will learn. Thank you, Dr. Basvaraj.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any other comments, any other experiences that anybody would like to share? Would you like to share your own engagement technique that you have used to make your class more effective? One or two incidents or one or two thing will help others also to understand and also appreciate.
I think this online education after COVID has rather forced us to move away from the traditional ways. If you want to sustain, if you want to engage students, we will have to devise new pedagogy. Traditional methodologies do not work at all now.
Okay. Daniel, you have something to ask?
Sir, sir, please enlighten us. Is there any loopholes inside the Indian education systems since the last 50 years? What the British are following applied since so, sir, please enlighten us.
Okay, enlighten us on the loopholes. So what do you think? What do the 55, okay, I will use Dr. Java's technique to get, what do you think? What do you think, Daniel? What are the loopholes?
Sir, for example, since last 50 years, we always assume that getting job is right target for our education system. If you do not get jobs, everything is meaningless. So, what is your opinion, sir?
Okay, getting a job is more important. What do the others think about this question? Could I get a couple of comments? Is
Okay,
there
sir.
any loopholes in the Indian system? Why is it that why is it that both the teacher and the thought are more interested in jobs?
So, since childhood period, we learned so many things from the schools, secondary, colleges, university. Until now, we have no realized what is the importance of educations.
Okay.
Support from the social levels, each and every elders targets: are you getting job or not? So if you are not getting jobs, everything is meaningless. So I have also confusion. I have also chaos whether I am targeting jobs, whether I am getting quality education. So I have little confusion. So please enlighten us.
Okay. Let me quote John Dewey. John Dewey is the world's leading American educationist that has written tremendously on the education system, processes, and outcomes. And what John Dewey has to say is that he says education is not preparation for life.
Thank you.
Okay, in the words of John Dewey, he says that education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. So, what did John Dewey mean? He says that learning may begin in the classroom, but it certainly doesn't end there. Okay, sorry.
Okay, sir.
Okay, Teachers set up the
Yes.
signs. So as teachers, we set up the signs for the road ahead, that is life itself. And therefore, as teachers, we normally inspire students to learn wherever life may take them. So, as a teacher, I am not preparing a student only to take up a job, but my job is to inspire students to learn whatever life may take them. And therefore, if you notice the stresses, the anxieties the students are experiencing today in terms of grades and pressures that is imparted, the type of courses and the competition, as well as the thing, for me as a teacher today, as Dr. Java said, my students can go to Wikipedia or Google and get the answers. They don't require a teacher. So the characteristic of a teacher has drastically changed
Yes, sir.
to allow students and equip them with life skills that could allow them to deal with failure, which is something that our kids, especially in the Asian continent and especially in India, find it extremely difficult for a parent to digest the fact that his or her child or ward has failed in a subject. And when parents cannot digest the fact, imagine how will a child cope with failure and how will failure be viewed. And so it's important to look at our role much more objectively in terms of how we can inspire, okay? Because the teacher and teaching is the greatest act of optimism. The students might disrespect us, they might misbehave with us, they might lack, students might lack enthusiasm, but teachers should never give up believing in them. Teachers are believers. They see the light at the end of the tunnel and they lead step by step. And the greatest act of optimism, okay, that even the worst student has talent that if he or she focuses on can become, fully blown, fully bloomed, and fully groomed person. And if I don't have as a teacher the optimism, okay, and if we use language in class, you will become nothing. You will not get a great job. Okay, you are a waste. I don't know why do you come. Now, this language doesn't suit the teacher in the present context. A teacher is an optimistic, resilient characteristic where he believes that every student has the potential, has the seed of greatness. And if every student has the seed of greatness, then this seed could grow and bear much fruit, irrespective of where he or she is placed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's an important aspect.
Mm.
Hello.
So, yeah. Anybody else? Any comments?
Hello.
Yes.
This is Mayank.
Yes, Maya.
Positive psychology also an important role for teachers.
Yes.
Positive psychology, because of whatever explaining here depends on the psychology also. If suppose teacher doesn't have the positive attitude or positive psychology to engage the students, so it will be tough to all teachers.
Yes. Positive psychology. In the last 15 years, positive psychology has taken center stage with tremendous amount of research that has gone into it. For more than 150 years, psychology has focused on what is wrong with people. If you notice that for 150 years in terms of psychological research, all sort of research was focusing on what is wrong with people and can we correct it. can we intervene by various therapies to correct it? However, in the last 20 years, psychology is now focusing on what is good in an individual, what is the strength of an individual, and to build the individual's future and destiny on the strength of individuals. Okay, so today, being an artist is something great. Being a chef is something great. So, in the last 20 years, the five important pillars of positive psychology are self efficacy, hope, resilience, emotional intelligence, yeah, and the positive psychological capacities. Now, these five positive pillars of positive psychology are today being integrated in almost all aspects. And therefore, we look at the strengths of a teacher and build a duties and responsibilities based on the strengths and develop the strengths so that his or her strengths are leveraged to a larger extent than wasting a lot of resources, energy, and time on trying to focus on the weaknesses, which you and I know will only incrementally change. But when I focus and invest resources and times on my strength, there is a quantum leap or there is a geometrical change in terms of what I can achieve.
Yes,
Yes, Mayank, it's very true that positive psychology, over the last 3 years, I'm one of the first researchers to work on something called positive leadership. And positive leadership has three dimensions: recognition, perspective. So it has recognition, perspective, and development. So, three important things. So, whenever a person, you recognize the person's strength and then design tasks around it, then he or she seem to be much more engaged in the workplace. He or she, while I do my PhD classes, I ask the students what they would like to choose. Would some of them like to do a group assignment or would you like to do an individual assignment? Now, based on their strengths, they would choose what type, but the rigor is kept the same, whether you do it in a group or you do it in an individual, whether you do a term paper or whether you write an essay. But all of these should have rubrics to say that the outcomes, that if you do it in a team or an individual, is the same. So always building on strength is very, very important in terms of the positivity. It's easy said, okay? Faculty here who have children, you get mad, you get provoked, and you say a lot of negative things to our children. Now, it's nice to say that we need to be positive, we need to give positive vibes. It's a conscious, mindful decision. And it takes a lot of time to re embed or rewire this positivity. You see, a particular student in class, is distracting. I still remember, I'll share an experience of mine. Uh, I completed my MPhil from the University of Delhi in 91. And after I had completed my MPhil in Delhi, I had two options. One is I had a job offer from the UB, United Breweries, in South Africa as a trainee training manager for about 7,500 rupees then, with all accommodation and all of it. And I had a teaching job for 750 rupees back in Bangalore. So I came back after my MPhil, 2 years of full-time MPhil from the University of Delhi, and took a teaching job. Now, nobody told me how to teach. Now, teachers in a school they do their B.Ed or E.Ed or whatever, and they go to a teaching school where they teach you how to teach. They teach them how to write a lesson plan and so on and so forth. But in higher education, we were not taught how to teach and so on and so forth. And I joined a business school, a very renowned business school. I'm going to keep the names and I was working under a former IIM Bangalore director, and we had an assignment to teach army officials, okay, people who have done their short-term service. They normally do an MBA program for the army people so that they can get jobs. And this was happening in IIM Bangalore. And my director called me one day and he told me that you have to do an organizational behavior course. You will start on Monday morning at 9 and finish on Saturday evening at 5. So it was a full modular approach. So I went to the first day, and if you know the logistics of IIM Bangalore, it's a galleries type. I had about 150 military personnel, okay, double my age. In 91, I was just about 26, 27. I had finished my MPhil and I'd just come in to the teaching because I chose to teach. It was a choice, not by accident, that I chose to teach. And I walked into this gallery setting and I saw about 150 plus with huge mustaches and nice bellies, and with their average age to be close to about 50 to 55 years. And it it put a lot of fear and a lot of stress. So I started off the first session somehow. And in the first session, I could see one of the gentlemen doing something like this on his book. Every few minutes, he was just doing, some sort of a ticking sort of a behavior. I could just see a ticking sort of a behavior. So that happened in the first session, and then the second session happened, and then when I was facilitating, my eyes were always drawn. So as teacher, your eyes are always drawn to something that you're distracted. You might have all students listening to you, but you might have one or two students who are distracting. So your attention is always focused on them. So every 3 or 5 seconds, I used to look, and he used to go on. So this happened in the third session and the fourth session. And in the last session of that Monday evening, the last session, I was doing a topic called the Johari window. Yeah, and the Johari window is a technique that we use in communication, wherein we try and reduce our blind spots and our closed self so that the public self or the known self is enlarged, so that there is no communication filters. Okay, so that is the objective of this. Now, as I looked at 4 sessions of this repetitive ticking behavior, when I came to this particular topic, I spoke to myself and I said that if I'm teaching this topic, I need to call out this particular behavior. Yeah, and I need to do something about it, because that one person's behavior is interfering in my effectiveness. Yeah, it was interfering in my effectiveness. And so but I was not very confident. I was a young lad, just got into teaching without knowing the consequences of teaching and the what do you say, the repercussions of types of students and all of it. But I feebly, before starting, I pointed out to the gentleman and I said, "Sir, in the last 4 sessions, I observed you that you were engaging in a ticking behavior. Yeah. Uh, what is it?" So I asked him, what is it that you were doing? Okay. Now, I'm sure that we have asked this question to many students in class. And what is the response that you normally get? Whenever you pick out a student and ask the student, what is it that you are doing? What is the sort of response do you normally get from students?
Denying that they will deny it at first.
Yeah, the first response is denial. Nothing, sir. Or they will say nothing, sir. Now you look at a 20-year-old guy in your class and a 55-year-old person in my class. Now the response is the same, denial is the same. So you please understand your behaviors will not change with age. You have to make a conscious choice to change your responses. Please understand this. So in your class, you might have a 20-year-old who denies it and says, nothing, sir. And then I have a 55-year-old army official retired from the army who exactly says the same thing. Now, most of us say, okay, why do I have to pursue it? And I leave it there. But please understand this. His behavior is interfering in my effectiveness. And therefore, it is important for me to check it so that I will be at peace in terms of doing or facilitating my course. So I was scared, but then what I did was I said that I spoke to that person. I said, sir, I know that you were ticking and doing a repetitive ticking behavior in your book. We would like to know what you're doing. So I got the class onto my side saying that in case he gets physical with me or he abuses me, I said it's not only me, but everybody else would like to know what you're doing. Now, this is the second step that an effective teacher should go, because you need to want to correct the behavior, not the person. So there's a difference between the behavior and the person. For me, the behavior is irritating, not the person. Okay. So when you push the person again, okay, what does the person do? What do a student do when you push him? Say, no, 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 no. I saw you doing something there. What were you doing? What are you doing? What does he or she normally say? When you push a student further to get an answer? Mayank?
Yes, sir. He will excuse. I think.
He will apologize, correct?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. See, the second tactic that all of us use is if I apologize, then the whole incident will be forgotten. Okay. So the student might say, sir, I'm sorry. Okay, or put the blame elsewhere is Father Vineet says, put the blame elsewhere. Yeah, but you normally tend to apologize. You say, I'm very, very sorry. Okay, I will not do it again. So even the best of the best teachers leave it at that. Okay, I anyway got my apology. So what does it matter? Okay, so let me go ahead with the class. Now, again, I'm coming. It's exactly what this gentleman did. He stood up and he said that he stood up and he said, I'm very sorry, sir, if this behavior is been interfering. I will not repeat it again. But did that answer my question? No, it did not answer my question. So as a psychologist, I go the third process. I said, I accept your apology. I would like to know what you were doing because I want to correct that behavior. And then I don't want that behavior to occur in future because it interferes in my effectiveness as a teacher. And then when I became a little bit assertive and looked at him and I said, sir, I accept your apology. Would you like to tell me what were you doing? So he stood up, he cleared his throat, and he said, Mr. Patrick, I am ticking the number of times you are saying, okay. I heard this response and I felt, I wish I was dead. I was profusely sweating. I said, why did my director send me to such a big thing? Why did he push me into this teaching job? Why did he give me this assignment? And there was so much of confusion and shame for a couple of seconds. I did not know, and I was profusely sweating, yeah, after listening to what he had to say. And then I said that I should kick myself for asking him what he was doing. And it was 150 plus elderly gentlemen. But I stood there and I looked at him and I said, thank you very much for that feedback. Can you continue to keep it? And then I went back home and I sobbed very bitterly. And I went to the mirror and I started substituting my okays with, did you understand? Is this fine? Can I repeat? And I started substituting it. And then I went on Tuesday, and on Saturday, this is what happened. On Saturday, I spoke to the gentleman in the class, in the last class, at the feedback time, and I pointed out and I said, sir, would you give me an account of the ticks? Now, this is what he had to say. He said, Mr. Patrick, the first session of 1 hour and 15 minutes, you said 150 times okay. Yeah, this is my first session, first class. Yeah, by Saturday, the last one before the last class, he had said it had moved from 150 maximum to 7 in a 1 hour and 15 minutes. Now, this is the power of feedback. Now, number one, the teacher needs to get, if needs to be effective, needs to get to the behavior. And once you understand that behavior and you've got feedback, you need to do something about that feedback to make you effective. And most feedback comes from students. Okay? Most feedback comes from students. And it's very important that you integrate. See, all feedback might not help you be effective. They say you're very tall. I can't do anything about it. But if the feedback is valid and reliable, then it's important. It's very, very important that we integrate that feedback. So the person giving the feedback also knows that the feedback was valuable and I have changed because of it. Yeah. So it's very important as a characteristic that you keep open, be open to feedback and solicit feedback. The more you ask for feedback, the more you will know that there are lots of blind spots that you are not aware, that other people can see. Yeah? Other people can see, but you cannot see. So make it a characteristic, whether it is peers. Yeah. In my institute, before a faculty does anything, any presentation, it is vetted with his or her peers. Before he sends a research article for publication, it is presented and then views are taken. And it enhances the quality of feedback. And it also gives an opportunity for all of us to learn from each other. And this is a very important aspect. Because when we carve and chip a way to create the best from the student, it takes years of dedication to do it. Okay. So as teachers, we help the learner discover their own interests, their own passions. And the ultimate goal is that they have to discover who they are, who they themselves are. Yeah. And teaching is the only profession that creates all other professions. So we are the source of anything that happens. Yeah. So we create comic artists, filmmakers, astronauts, architects, entrepreneurs. And without us, there would be no Superman, there would be no Eiffel Tower, or there is no internet. It is we who have the greatest superpower of creating superheroes and heroines. And that lies with us. And the characteristic is to a larger extent to give most of ourselves and be open to what we are supposed to do rather than be cowed down, because our teaching breeds a lot of confidence, and confidence breeds hope. And hope is an important positive psychological being. If you look at some of the most challenged uh, great people that we've had, the challenges that uh, they overcame is because of the hope that knowledge empowers leaders. Knowledge drives breakthroughs and it inspires discoveries. And this is an important aspect. Yeah. If you look at the atom, gravity, and elements of the Earth's core have been discovered by scientists, but students are on their own journeys discovering for themselves. And what this journey will be, whether a student will drop out, whether he'll be disinterested in something, is dependent upon how does the journey look like begins with the teacher and what the teacher has to say. And therefore, most of us remember to a larger extent our school teachers. If you spend 10 years in a particular school, a particular teacher, it is what the teacher is more important than what the teacher teaches. So the action speaks louder than words. So action speaks louder than words for most of us, isn't it? And why we say something and do the opposite, the conflict that a student could experience is much, much difficult. Okay. And it always says that it's better than 1,000 days of diligent study is one day with a great teacher. So my hours and hours of hard work might be come to a naught with just 1 hour in the presence of a great teacher. I'm sure that all of us have heard this very, very most often cited quote by William Ward. He says, a mediocre teacher tells, okay? A good teacher explains, a superior teacher demonstrates. However, a great teacher inspires. And that is the role and the characteristic that we need to imbibe for us to be effective, to be remembered, to leave a legacy. And as teachers, because we choose to be a teacher, okay, they say, I mean, I'm sure that you and I have heard this opinion, or what do we say? It's a common thinking about most people that if you're useless in other things, then you come to teach. Okay, you couldn't get a job, you couldn't, and these are some things that constantly hurts a lot of people who have chosen this particular destiny, knowing very well that we don't have perks, we don't have perquisites, we do not have a great salary. But the ability to inspire generations of students, hundreds, just imagine how many people in corporate can get an audience of 60 people to listen to what they have to say. And when we have hundreds of students in rapt attention in a particular place to hear and see what we have to say, imagine the sort of impact that we can have on students' lives and what they do. Yeah. And 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 our greatest characteristic is to allow the learner to think. I do not need to think for themselves. I need to teach them how to think, not what to think. You know, and allow for them to bloom and bloom so that they're full. The seed is an important aspect that all of us have. And if we can recognize that seed of potential in every individual, then I'm sure that all of us would be great, effective, and remembered teachers. Okay, to end the session, I would like to quote the famous author on empires of the mind in his book, Empires of the Mind, in terms of written by Dennis Whatley. He says, life is like a field of freshly fallen snow. Life is like a field of freshly fallen snow. Where you go, every step will show. Happy teaching, and thank you very much for this session. I'm open if you have any questions, any comments, anything that you would like, and I'm open for feedback, anything that you would like to say specifically, you would like to add, you're most welcome to do so.
Any questions from the participants? The session is open for questions. Anyway, as they prepare for with the questions, let me thank you, sir. It was such an interesting session that we all enjoyed, and we were into your class. Actually, as a teacher, you mentored us with so many information, and we got groomed like how a teacher has to be, and it was like we were recollecting like what are our characters and how to exhibit and how to be in power with the students so that we understand what they want, and it would be more effective and useful for training up the future generation too. Thank you so much, sir, for coming with such interesting speech. And participants from your side, would you like to add something to what I would like to ask sir something? Or can we wind up the session?
Yeah, Saturday, and everybody is forced to stay on a Saturday full day.
No, sir. Actually, they were enjoying, like
Yeah.
seeing them.
We've
All
kept the
these.
best.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
No,
the
sir,
best.
it's
Dr. Gladys has kept the best
no,
for
no,
the
sir.
last.
Very insightful session. In fact, what I can say, very insightful session, sir. Not at all. We are, listening to you very patiently and very, nicely, because your voices and your way of teaching is very, very, nice. So I'm overwhelmed by your lecture, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for that
Hello.
comment and feedback.
This is Mayank, sir. I'm very impressed, sir. Whatever information you provide us and very practical things you explained, and your experience for class with the military person is very important to understand the situation in classroom. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, can we get your mail ID, sir?
Sure, I'll just put it on the chat box, please.
So as sir is getting ready with the mail ID, let me remind the participants, hope you have got the feedback link. You may kindly fill in, and don't forget to join for the last session for this FDP program at 2 o'clock. Okay. So by chance, if you have not got the link, please let me know. I'll post it again.
So I put my email ID on the chat for anybody to extend any sort of help, especially in the OBE, human resource management and organizational behavior area of research management. You can reach out to me for any help, whether it's in research or projects or anything. I would be open for any of it. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you for your rapt attention and your feedback. Thank you, Dr. Gladys, for inviting me. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for sparing your time and giving such a useful material for us. And we learned so much from you. Thank you so much, sir. Looking forward for future speeches from you.
Sure, sure.
Thank you, sir. So you may leave and join at 2 o'clock. Thank you.